get to the end of your day and feel like you've just been spinning your wheels? You were busy, but were you actually productive? Well, Peter Drucker, the father of modern management, he created what you could call the ultimate executive operating system to fix exactly that. In this section, we're going to focus on its core components: knowing your time, getting rid of waste, focusing on your real contribution, building on strengths, doing first things first, and of course, making decisions that actually matter. So let's get it installed. Drucker starts with a really tough, fundamental question. Are you busy or are you effective? Because it's dangerously easy to confuse activity with accomplishment, isn't it? Drucker gives us a system to break free from this busyness trap and start generating actual, tangible results. So here's our roadmap to becoming a much more effective leader. We're going to walk through Drucker's 6 essential practices, starting with the absolute foundation, mastering your time, and taking it all the way to making those high-stakes decisions that really define your impact. Let's get started. All right, first up, mastering time. Drucker is absolutely insistent on this. This is the non-negotiable foundation of all effectiveness. And we're not just talking about scheduling here. This is about taking command of your single most valuable and completely irreplaceable resource. Drucker just cuts right to the chase here. Time is brutally unique. You can't borrow it like money. You can't hire more of it like you can with people. There is no substitute. Once a minute is gone, it is gone forever. And that's exactly why effective executives don't start with their tasks or their plans. They start by analyzing their time. So how do you actually do it? Well, Drucker lays out this simple, really powerful process. Step 1, record your time. And I don't mean from memory at the end of the day. I mean in real time as it happens. This isn't just tracking. Think of it as a diagnostic tool that will probably shatter your illusions about where your day really goes. Step 2, manage it. Ask yourself 2 questions for every single activity. What would happen if this just wasn't done at all? If the answer is nothing, then eliminate it. Then ask, which of these things could someone else do? Delegate it. Finally, step 3, consolidate. Group what's left, your discretionary time, into big 90-minute-plus blocks. That's the minimum dose for any deep, meaningful work. Okay, so now that you've started to get a handle on your time, what's next? The next step is to define your contribution. See, it's not enough to be efficient. You have to be effective. And that means asking, what is the most important thing I can do with my time to actually impact results? Now, this table, this isn't just a comparison, it's a diagnostic for your entire mindset. The person focused downward on their efforts, their title, their busy work, they're a subordinate, no matter what their rank is. But the person focused upward on the results the organization needs, on the customer's reality, that person is top management in their thinking, even if they're a junior associate. And believe me, that mindset shift is everything. This one question is a total game changer. It shifts your focus from your little to-do list to the much bigger picture. It forces you to constantly ask, how can I make the biggest possible impact? For any growing organization, this is the absolute key to alignment. I mean, when everyone is asking this question, you transform a group of employees into a team of results-driven leaders. So you know where your time goes, and you know what your contribution has to be. The next question is, how do you mobilize people to actually get it done? Well, Drucker's answer is pretty radical. You build on what people can do, and you make their weaknesses irrelevant. This is such a deeply counterintuitive idea, isn't it? Our first instinct is to find well-rounded people and try to fix their weaknesses. But Drucker argues that's a direct path to mediocrity. Human excellence is always specialized. Strong people always have strong weaknesses. The effective executive doesn't try to change that. They use it. The goal isn't to fix people. It's to make their strengths so productive that their weaknesses just don't matter. And this just illustrates the concept so brilliantly. When his advisors were complaining that his best general, Ulysses S. Grant, was a heavy drinker, Lincoln famously replied, "Find out what brand of whiskey Grant drinks. I would like to send a barrel of it to my other generals." Lincoln didn't care about Grant's weakness. He cared about his singular, overwhelming strength. The man won battles. That is the essence of effective staffing. Okay, you've mastered your time, you've focused your contribution, and you're leveraging strengths. But what if your organization itself is the thing getting in the way? Let's look at how to diagnose and eliminate those systemic time wasters. Think of this table like a consultant's diagnostic cheat sheet. If the same crisis pops up over and over again, that's not bad luck. It's a failure of systems and foresight. If your calendar is just swamped with meetings, Drucker says that's a clear sign of a broken organization. As he put it, one either meets or one works. If your managers spend more than a small fraction of their time on internal friction and human relations, you are overstaffed. These are not just annoyances, they are symptoms of deep organizational diseases that have to be cured. Now that we've started to clear away the waste, we can apply force where it truly matters. And this brings us to concentration, the real secret of people who achieve truly extraordinary things. The secret to high achievement is actually pretty simple. Do one thing at a time. Drucker believed multitasking was a guaranteed recipe for mediocrity. By spreading your efforts thin, you never, ever achieve the critical mass of energy and focus that's required for excellence. Effective people, they focus on their top priority, and they learn to ignore everything else. This leads us to the crucial concept of priorities, which are the things you decide not to do. Look, it's easy to make a to-do list. It takes real courage and discipline to make a to-don't list. For example, maybe you decide to stop attending a weekly meeting that's no longer productive to free up that time for a more important project. You have to abandon the products and habits of yesterday to free up your best resources for the opportunities of tomorrow. And this brings us to the final capstone practice. You've cleared the decks. You've concentrated your energy. Now you have to convert all that potential into reality through effective decisions. Before you even think about the answer, you have to define the question. Boundary conditions are the non-negotiable criteria that the solution has to meet. For instance, if you're choosing a new software system, your boundary conditions might be that it must integrate with your existing CRM and it must stay within a specific budget. Any solution that doesn't meet those criteria is immediately disqualified. This turns decision-making from just a guess into a logical process. And here's the stark reality of what happens when you fail to define your boundary conditions, or when you try to satisfy ones that are incompatible. Drucker cited the Bay of Pigs invasion as a classic failure. The decision had two core conditions. One, overthrow Castro, but two, make it look like the US government wasn't involved. These were fundamentally incompatible. The result wasn't a compromise, it was a catastrophe. A decision that violates its own boundary conditions is doomed before it even starts. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. Let's synthesize all of this into a single cohesive playbook for elite performance. Here it is, your core operating system upgrade. First, know your time. Record it, prune the waste, and consolidate it into powerful 90-minute blocks. Second, focus on contribution. Always look up from your work and ask what results the organization truly needs from you. Third, build on strengths. Staff to maximize performance, not to minimize weakness. Fourth, eliminate organizational waste. Diagnose the root cause of those recurring crises and kill unproductive meetings. Fifth, concentrate your force. Do one thing at a time and have the courage to decide what you will stop doing. And finally, make effective decisions. Define your non-negotiable boundary conditions before you act. And honestly, this is the most empowering idea of all. Drucker insists that effectiveness is not some gift you're born with. It isn't charisma, it isn't genius. It is a discipline. It's a set of practices that absolutely anyone can learn and master through deliberate, systematic effort. You are watching 100 Lessons from Peter Drucker. In our next section, we will cover managing the boss, systematic entrepreneurship, the unexpected, the incongruity, process needs, and industry changes.
All right, in this section, we are going to dive deep into some of Peter Drucker's most powerful ideas. We're going to focus on how to know thy time, how to eliminate time wasters, why you need to focus on contribution, the importance of building on strengths, doing first things first, and finally, making truly effective decisions.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're building a powerful mental model straight from the mind of the legend himself, Peter Drucker. And he starts with a reality that's, well, pretty stark. Time is the one thing you can't rent, hire, buy, or ever get back. The supply is completely fixed. Now, this isn't just some clever quote. It is the absolute bedrock of everything else we're about to discuss.
So this brings up a huge question, a paradox that Drucker really obsessed over. We've all seen it, right? People who are brilliant, hardworking, creative, but they just can't seem to get anything done. They can't turn all that brain power into actual results. The answer he found is surprisingly pretty simple, but actually doing it is another story. And here's the really good news. This means anyone, and I mean anyone, can learn to be effective. It's not some gift you're born with. It's a set of habits, a discipline you build through practice until it becomes second nature. So let's dive in and break down that system.
We're going to build this thing together, step by step. We'll start with the foundation you absolutely cannot skip, mastering your time, and build all the way up to the very peak of what an executive does, making the right decisions. So, the whole journey to becoming effective doesn't start with your to-do list or your big strategic goals. No, it starts with the one raw material you have to work with, your time. Effective people don't start with tasks, they start with time.
Let me ask you, and be honest with yourself. Do you really know where your time goes? Drucker would argue that, no, you probably don't. He found that if you rely on your memory, you're basically lying to yourself. He saw executives who were convinced they were spending all their time on big strategy, but in reality, they were just putting out fires. The only way to get to the truth is to track it.
Now, this isn't about micromanaging yourself into misery. It's about being brutally honest about your most precious, non-renewable resource. First, you log your time as it happens, not at the end of the day. Then, you look at that log and you diagnose it with a critical eye. And finally, you take whatever time you have left and you consolidate it into big, usable chunks, because you just can't do deep work in 15-minute scraps. And when you actually do this, what you find can be pretty shocking. This table is a perfect example of what reality often looks like. You think you're being strategic, but you're really just stuck in meetings and crises. And those recurring crises? Drucker says they're almost never bad luck. They're a sign of bad systems. He tells a story about a hospital administrator who was always dealing with a bed shortage crisis. But the time log showed it was just a paperwork problem. One little change to the process, and the crisis disappeared forever. So once you have the data from your time log, you use these 3 questions like a surgeon's scalpel. The first one is simple. If nothing would happen if you stop doing something, then for goodness sake, stop doing it. The last question, though, that one takes real courage to actually go and ask your team, what am I doing that wastes your time? But it's absolutely vital for a healthy organization.
Okay, so you've used your time log to claw back some precious hours. Now what? Where do you point all that reclaimed energy? This brings us to the next level of the pyramid, and it's all about shifting your entire mindset from just doing stuff to getting results.
This idea is a total game changer. It's about switching from asking, what are my tasks, to asking, what results are actually expected of me, and what can I contribute that will really move the needle for this whole organization? That one question cuts through so much of the daily noise. And this table just lays out the difference perfectly. It's night and day, right? The person focused on effort is basically a subordinate, no matter what their fancy title is. But the person who focuses on contribution, the one who holds themselves accountable for the success of the whole team, that person is top management in the truest sense of the word. And this quote is the perfect bridge to Drucker's next big idea, first things first. Because once you know what contribution is really needed, you have to have the discipline to focus only on that. You know, the secret of people who get an incredible amount done is that they do one thing at a time. They practice monotasking.
And here's the thing most people miss. Setting priorities is not an analytical exercise. It's an act of courage. It's so easy to spend all day solving problems, which really just gets you back to zero. Real breakthroughs come from seizing opportunities. And it's not just about setting priorities. It's about setting posteriorities, making the tough, courageous call about what you will stop doing, and then actually sticking to it.
So, we've managed our time, we've focused our efforts, but how do we get that real leverage? How do we amplify our impact? Drucker's answer is crystal clear. You build on strengths. You simply cannot build performance on weakness, and you definitely can't build it on things a person can't do at all. This story about General Robert E. Lee just nails it. You staff for what a person can do, for their unique strengths, not for a lack of weaknesses. Abraham Lincoln knew Ulysses S. Grant had his issues, but he also knew Grant won battles. That's the whole purpose of an organization, to make individual strengths effective and make their weaknesses totally irrelevant. Drucker also gives us this great warning about something he called the widowmaker job. And we've all seen these roles. It's that position where 2 or 3 really capable people have gone in and failed spectacularly. The problem isn't the people, it's the job itself. It's designed for a superhero who just doesn't exist. So how do you fix a job like that? Well, you don't keep searching for a unicorn. You have to assume the job is the problem, that it was designed badly. An effective organization doesn't hunt for geniuses. It designs roles that normal people with specific strengths can actually succeed in. If a job has beaten 2 good people, don't try a third. Redesign the job. Okay, we've made it to the top of the pyramid. All of these other practices,
Managing your time, focusing on contribution, leveraging strengths, they all lead to this one thing, the core task of any executive, making effective decisions. And this isn't about being fast, it's about being sound.
Before you even start thinking about a solution or a compromise, Drucker insists you have to define the boundary conditions. What does a win actually look like? What are the absolute minimum goals this decision has to achieve? If it doesn't meet those conditions, the decision is useless. The classic example is the Bay of Pigs invasion, a plan that tried to do two contradictory things at once. It wasn't a decision, it was just wishful thinking.
An effective decision process looks very different from what most of us are used to. It doesn't start with a compromise. And get this, it's not about finding consensus. In fact, Drucker said that a decision made without some disagreement is probably a sign that nobody really understands the problem. You need dissent to test your options and spark new ideas. The first rule is you don't make a decision unless there is disagreement.
And this quote brings it all home. A decision is not real until it has degenerated into work. It has to be translated into action. Who is accountable for getting this done? What's the deadline? Who needs to be looped in? Without those action items, it's just talk. It's a good intention, not a decision.
Okay, let's put this all together. Think of it as a flywheel that builds momentum. First, you master your time, because that's your limiting resource. That gives you the fuel. Then, you direct your focus on contribution, which points the flywheel in the right direction. Next, you amplify your impact by building on strengths, which makes the flywheel spin faster. And finally, all of this allows you to decide effectively, which keeps that wheel spinning true and strong.
You see, these aren't just separate tips you can pick and choose from. They are an interconnected system. Each part reinforces all the others, creating this powerful cycle of increasing effectiveness over time. So the very first step in putting this pyramid to work for you isn't about adding something new, it's about taking something away. So I'll leave you with this question. What is the one thing you will stop doing tomorrow? You've been watching 100 Lessons from Peter Drucker. In our next section, we will cover managing the boss, systematic entrepreneurship, the unexpected, the incongruity, process needs, and industry changes.
In this section, we are going to focus on the 7 sources of innovation by Peter Drucker. We're diving into a strategic blueprint for survival from the absolute legend himself. This is powerful stuff.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to start by totally reframing what innovation even is. Then, we'll break down Drucker's 7 sources, see how you can actually apply them, and wrap it all up with a super fast summary of the core principles. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, first things first, let's just bust a popular myth right now. Drucker's whole philosophy is that innovation isn't some kind of mysterious art form, reserved for a few creative geniuses. Nope, he saw it as something way more practical. And frankly, a lot more reliable. See, he argued that it's a purposeful, systematic discipline. Think of it as an economic and social task that anyone and any organization can and really must master if they want to stick around. This definition right here, it's a game changer. It shifts innovation from something you just kind of hope for into something you actively go out and hunt for. So the crucial question is, where in the world do you look? Well, Drucker gave us a map. He identified 4 sources of opportunity right inside your own organization or industry. He called these windows, and believe me, they are the absolute best place to start looking.
These first 4 sources are your bread and butter. Why? Because they're the least risky and most reliable places to find some truly game-changing opportunities. Let's break them down one by one.
The richest and, honestly, the simplest source is the unexpected. This could be a surprise success, where a product just flies off the shelves for reasons you totally didn't see coming. Or it could be an unexpected failure, like the infamous Ford Edsel, which accidentally revealed a whole new market. Either way, it's the market literally telling you something your spreadsheets are missing.
All right, source number 2 is what Drucker called incongruities. This is all about finding a disconnect, a place where what is happening just doesn't line up with what everyone in the industry thinks should be happening. Like when traditional steel mills saw demand going up but profits going down. That makes no sense, right? Well, mini mills jumped right into that gap, that friction. That's where innovation thrives.
The third internal source is process need. Now, this isn't about some grand, earth-shattering new idea. It's about looking at a process we already have and perfecting it by finding and fixing that one single weak link. It's super task-focused and very specific.
And our fourth internal source shows us something fascinating. When an industry grows or changes really fast, the established leaders are often the last ones to notice. This creates a huge opening for challengers to swoop in. So, now that we've looked inward, let's see what happens when we start looking at the wider world.
Okay, time to look outside the four walls of your organization. We're now going to look at the broader social and intellectual environment for the next 3 windows of opportunity.
These external sources are all about the big shifts happening in the world around us. And yeah, they often carry a higher risk, but let me tell you, they also come with a much, much higher potential reward. The stakes are bigger out here. Demographics are just unbelievably powerful because these changes have known lead times. You don't have to guess what's coming. You can literally see the future market taking shape years, sometimes even decades in advance. It's like having a cheat code. This next source is fascinating. It's all about changes in mood, meaning, and perspective. The underlying facts of a situation might be exactly the same, but if people start seeing the world differently, if the glass suddenly looks half full instead of half empty, that shift creates entirely new markets out of thin air. And here we have them, the superstars. New knowledge is by far the riskiest source. Why? Because you often have to be right the first time. There are usually no second chances. But the payoff can redefine entire industries for generations to come. So, you've been searching the windows and you've found an opportunity. Now what? How does a growing organization actually take these lessons and benefit from them? Well, Drucker provides a really clear matrix for action. This blueprint shows that successful innovation isn't just about having good ideas, it requires specific, disciplined actions. And just look at what's at the top: planned abandonment. That means systematically letting go of yesterday's successes to free up your best people and resources for whatever's next. This next principle, it is a complete mindset shift, and it's absolutely key to making this work. Drucker hammered this home. Leaders have to move from being firefighters who are always just solving problems to being prospectors who are proactively out there seizing opportunities. And when you do seize those opportunities, you have to remember this crucial point. The best, most effective innovations are simple and focused. They don't try to be everything to everyone. They solve one specific problem for one specific group, and they do it exceptionally well. And at the end of the day, all of this hard work has to be aimed at a single, defining purpose. Because if your great idea doesn't create a customer or serve an existing one better, it's not actually an innovation, it's just an invention. So let's bring all these principles together. All right, let's boil this all down into the core doctrine. To survive and thrive in a changing world, organizations have to treat innovation as a disciplined, opportunity-focused practice. Here are the 4 key shifts you have to make. You ready? It really boils down to this. First, you have to stop feeding your problems and start feeding your opportunities. That means you have to do step 2, practice organized abandonment of the things that just don't work anymore. Third, you must systematically search all 7 of these windows all the time. And finally, you have to protect the new thing by structuring it separately from the demands of the day-to-day business. You put those 4 things together, and you create a self-renewing institution that actually thrives on change instead of fearing it. Now, this deep dive in innovation is just one part of a huge body of work that continues to shape modern management. I really hope this explainer gave you a clear, actionable framework to work with. You're watching 100 Lessons from Peter Drucker. In our next section, we'll cover demographics, changes in perception, new knowledge, the revolutionary knowledge worker concept, their productivity, and what Drucker called the most important step, defining the task. I look forward to exploring more of his wisdom with you then. All right, let's jump right in. We're about to unpack the game-changing ideas of the one and only Peter Drucker. Why? Because he basically wrote the playbook for the modern economy. We're going to explore how massive, predictable shifts in society create incredible opportunities, what really happens when knowledge becomes our most valuable resource, and maybe, most importantly, how to actually be effective in a world that's obsessed with just being busy. And this quote? This is the key to everything. It's the whole foundation. Drucker's big point was that you can be the most efficient person in the world checking off a million tasks, but if they're the wrong tasks, it's all for nothing. This huge difference between just being active and getting real results, that's what we're all about today. So, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to look at the huge forces that are already shaping our future. Then, we'll see how new ideas are actually put to work. After that, we'll meet the star of the show in today's economy, the knowledge worker. And we'll wrap it all up with the one question you absolutely have to ask to make a real difference. Okay, first up, let's talk about the big, external forces that Drucker saw as pure, untapped opportunities. These aren't random chances. He believed they were totally predictable.
Drucker had this amazing concept he called the future that has already happened. It sounds a little mystical, right? But it's actually incredibly practical. He argued that demographics, population stats, aren't boring numbers. They are the clearest signal you'll ever get about the future. Why? Because the people who are going to be your employees and your customers in 20 years, they've already been born. It's a fact.
And this chart shows you exactly what he was talking about. While everyone else was worried about overpopulation, Drucker saw this demographic cleavage and warned about an underpopulation crisis in the developed world. Think about the tension that creates. You've got a shrinking pool of young workers on one side and a booming market of older experienced people on the other. That's not a problem. That's a massive opportunity.
And this is where the rubber meets the road. Look at these examples. Japan saw a baby bust coming and went all in on robotics to handle the future labor shortage. The Girl Scouts saw a new wave of preschoolers and created the Daisy Scouts to meet them where they were. California banks realized there was this amazing, untapped talent pool of older workers and boosted their productivity. You see, they weren't just reacting to today. They were building for a future they could already see.
But demographics are only one piece of the puzzle. The other, and maybe even more powerful force, is perception. As this chart shows, the facts are the facts. The water level is what it is. But when you shift how you see it, from a problem to an opportunity, everything changes. It's the fundamental difference between being paralyzed by fear and driving real innovation.
And this quote just nails it. The big takeaway here is that innovation isn't always about creating a brand new gadget. Sometimes, the biggest innovation is simply seeing the same old world in a completely new way. When you spot a major shift in public mood or meaning, that's not just a feeling. That's a concrete, valuable opportunity waiting for you.
So you've got a predictable future trend, and you've got a new way of seeing the world. What happens when you add the final ingredient? Well, that brings us to what Drucker called the superstar of entrepreneurship, harnessing new knowledge.
A single piece of new knowledge is rarely enough. Drucker explained this with his law of convergence. It's a great story. Alexander Fleming discovers penicillin. Amazing, right? But it was just a lab curiosity. It didn't become a world-changing innovation until Pfizer brought a totally separate piece of knowledge, their expertise in fermentation, to the party. That's when the magic happened. The breakthrough needed all the pieces of the puzzle to converge.
And here's the crucial warning label that comes with knowledge. Unlike oil or gold, knowledge is perishable. It has a shelf life. It goes stale. In today's economy, continuous learning isn't just a nice self-help idea, it is a basic survival requirement for you, for me, and for our organizations.
So you take these huge shifts in demographics, in perception, in knowledge, and what do you get? You get a brand new main character in the story of our economy, the knowledge worker.
Drucker actually coined this term way back in 1959. Think about how ahead of his time he was. A knowledge worker's #1 asset is what's between their ears. They own their means of production, their knowledge, and they can pack it up and take it with them anytime they want. This just completely flips the old power dynamic on its head. You can't command them. You have to lead them as partners. Drucker believed this was the single biggest social transformation of the 20th century.
And if you want to see just how different this new world of work is, this table says it all. In the old world of manual work, the task was just handed to you. Output was all about quantity. Management was command and control. But for knowledge work, well, first you have to define the task. Output isn't about how many, it's about how good. And management has to be a partnership built on trust and autonomy. It's a totally different game.
So how do you actually make this new workforce productive? Drucker gave us these 6 non-negotiable rules. And look what's number 1. Define the task. It requires autonomy, innovation built into the job itself, and continuous learning. It shifts the focus from quantity to quality. And maybe most importantly, it forces us to see people as a capital asset to invest in, not just a cost on a spreadsheet.
Okay, this brings us to our final section, and honestly, to the heart of the matter. It's the single most powerful action any of us can take, the first commandment of effectiveness.
Let's just pause on this for a second. 4 simple words. What is the task? But Drucker was convinced that everything, absolutely everything, starts here. Not how do we get busy, but what is the one thing we should actually be doing?
And why is that question so critical? Because of this brutal truth. Answering what is the task is the only thing that saves us from the efficiency trap, from getting really good at doing stuff that just doesn't matter. It forces us to put effectiveness first.
And this isn't just a theory. The results are real and they are transformative.
When hospital nurses asked this question, they realized their task wasn't paperwork, it was patient care. Productivity doubled. When Harry Truman realized his real task after the war was foreign policy, he literally changed the world. When Jack Welch defined GE's task as market leadership, he remade an icon. Getting clear on the task is what separates good from great.
Okay, let's wrap this all up. We've gone from huge societal changes all the way down to the actions of a single person. So let's quickly summarize the core lessons you can start using right away.
All right, in about 90 seconds, here's what you need to remember. 1. Demographics are your crystal ball. The future isn't a mystery. It's already here. Use it. 2. A change in perception is a real opportunity. Pay attention to how the world's meaning is shifting. 3. Your knowledge and your ability to keep learning is your only real long-term advantage. And 4. Always, always, always focus on effectiveness before efficiency. Do the right things first.
And what can you do on Monday morning? Start every single project by asking, what is the task? Then ask yourself, what is my unique contribution here? Remember, you are the CEO of your own career. Manage yourself accordingly. And finally, get good at what Drucker called organized abandonment. That just means having the courage to stop doing things that aren't working anymore, so you can free up your best resources for what's next.
So, there you have it. That's the framework Drucker gave us. It's simple, it's powerful, and it's probably more relevant now than it was when he first wrote it. So the only real question left is the one he would ask you directly. What is the one thing you are going to do differently?
Thanks for joining this session of 100 Lessons from Peter Drucker. In our next section, we're going to get even more practical, diving deep into things like a focus on quality, the power of autonomy, building innovation into the job, and what it means to be a continuous learner and teacher. We'll see you there.
In this section, we are going to cover structure and organizational design by Peter Drucker. We're going to dive into his timeless blueprint for building organizations that are not just effective, but are truly high-performing. This is an abstract theory. We're talking about the real nuts and bolts of how great work actually gets done. And this quote is the absolute perfect place to start. It totally flips the script on what most people think management is. For Drucker, being a manager isn't about sitting back and reacting to whatever happens. No, it's about being an architect. It's about actively, consciously, and deliberately designing the future of your organization. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to dismantle some of the old, rigid ideas that hold so many companies back. Then we'll build Drucker's vision right from the ground up. We'll start big with the overall structure, then zoom in to how teams work together, and finally, we'll look at the critical role of leaders who are truly accountable. All right, let's get right into it. Drucker starts by taking a hammer to the single biggest and, frankly, most dangerous assumption that has dominated management thinking for, well, over a century. This right here, this shows the complete 180-degree turn in thinking that Drucker brought to the table. He said, forget about there being one right way to organize. That's nonsense. Your structure is a tool, not some sacred text. It has to be designed for the specific job you're trying to do. And the goal? It's not to manage people, it's to lead them. And maybe most important of all, results? They're not found in your internal reports. They only exist outside your walls, with a happy customer or a healed patient. So what does this really mean? It means these ideas aren't just for Fortune 500 CEOs. They are just as crucial for a hospital administrator, a university president, or even a general in the army. For Drucker, management is the essential organ for any institution where you have people with different kinds of knowledge trying to work together toward one common goal. Okay, with that foundation in place, let's look at the first couple of big architectural principles for building the skeleton of the organization. This is all about creating a framework that can actually grow without collapsing under its own weight. Drucker really sharpened this idea after his famous study of General Motors. The whole concept is about pushing authority down and out to the people who are closest to the action. So don't think of a huge company as one giant monolith. Instead, picture it as a federation of smaller, self-governing businesses. Think Chevrolet or Buick back in the day at GM. Each one operates with its own P&L, but they're all tied together by a shared central strategy. And the benefits here are just huge. Drucker argued it's the only system that really grooms future leaders, because you give them real command when they're still young enough to learn from their mistakes that won't sink the whole ship. It keeps the head office focused on the big picture, not stuck in the weeds, and it lets the whole organization get bigger without turning into a slow, bloated bureaucracy. This quote is just brilliant. It perfectly captures his second major principle, the law of least levels. Drucker basically said, every extra layer of management you add is a design flaw. Think about it. Every time a message gets passed up or down the chain, it's like a game of telephone. It introduces noise, misunderstandings, delays, things get distorted. A tall hierarchy isn't a sign of strength. It's a symptom of a poorly organized company. So, once you have that big picture structure in place, you gotta focus on the inside. How do people actually get work done together? Drucker gave us this fantastic, super practical analogy from the world of sports to break it all down. Drucker was crystal clear. You have to pick the right tool for the job. He saw three kinds of teams. First, you've got the baseball team. Players have fixed positions, and the work happens one after another, in a sequence. Think of a classic assembly line or a surgical team. Then there's the football team. Again, fixed positions, but now everyone works in parallel at the same time, all coordinated. That's your hospital trauma unit. And finally, you have the tennis doubles team. This is the most fluid. Players cover for each other, adapting constantly. This is perfect for small startup or maybe a jazz combo. And here's the bottom line, the absolute key takeaway. You cannot play baseball and football on the same field at the same time. It just doesn't work. If you try to mix and match these team models, you're just asking for chaos. So you have to ask, what's the task? Is it repetitive? Use a baseball model. Do you need a bunch of specialists working together at once? That's a football model. Is it super creative and unpredictable? You need a tennis doubles team. Get this wrong, and you're setting your people up to fail. But look, you can have the most perfect structure in the world, and it's totally useless without the right people driving it. For Drucker, accountability wasn't just some buzzword. It was the moral anchor of management. It's the real engine of performance. And his main tool for this was management by objectives, or MBO. But here's the part everyone misses. The real magic isn't just the objectives, it's the self-control that comes with it. It's about creating, as he put it, freedom under the law. Individuals become accountable for their results, not just their activities. It turns the organization's needs into personal goals, which naturally fosters self-control instead of old-school top-down command. A brilliant, really practical way to do this is something Drucker called the manager's letter. Just imagine this for a second. Instead of your typical performance review, the employee writes a letter to their boss. In it, they lay out what they think their boss's goals are, what their own goals are to support that, and what they need to succeed. I mean, this one simple thing completely flips the entire dynamic. It turns a judgment from a boss into a real, collaborative conversation about shared goals. And in the end, for Drucker, this is what it all boiled down to. Leadership isn't about status. It's not about the corner office or the fancy title. It is a profound responsibility. A responsibility to make people's strengths productive and their weaknesses irrelevant. A responsibility to serve the mission of the institution. And integrity? Well, that was the one thing that was completely non-negotiable. Okay, let's pull all of this together. We're going to do a rapid-fire, high-impact summary of Drucker's core principles for designing a great organization. All right, here is the entire blueprint in a nutshell. 1. Design for the task, not some textbook fantasy. 2. Push authority down to empower people. 3. Keep it flat. Kill the noise. 4. Pick the right team for the job. Don't try to play baseball with a football team. 5. Focus on what people can do, not what they can't. 6. Demand accountability for results. And 7. Never, ever forget that the only place real value gets created is outside your four walls. And that leaves us with one final big question to chew on. Does your organization's structure actually help your people do their best work? Or does it just create friction, noise, and bureaucracy that gets in their way? You are watching 100 Lessons from Peter Drucker. In our next section, we will cover personal mastery and self-management. In this section, we are going to cover personal mastery and self-management by Peter Drucker. Now, these are the ideas that really fundamentally change the game for professionals everywhere. They shifted the responsibility for your career success squarely onto your shoulders, right where it belongs. You know, Drucker's whole idea here was a pretty radical shift. For most of history, your path was kind of laid out for you. But in today's knowledge economy, that's just not true anymore. You are the CEO of your own career. And in that job, your most critical asset isn't your resume, it's how well you actually know yourself. So here's the journey we're going to go on today. Think of it as a roadmap, starting with who you are and ending with what you're going to do. We'll kick things off by talking about taking command of your career. Then we'll dive into discovering your unique talents, defining what you stand for, And finally, putting all that knowledge to work to make a real contribution. All right, so this is the foundational idea, the big one. Drucker argued that as knowledge workers, we're totally different from the workers of the past. Why? Because we own the means of production, our own minds. And what that means is you can't just sit around and wait for a company to manage you. You have to manage yourself, just like a CEO runs a company. I mean, just think about the numbers for a second. The average big company might be around for, 30 years? But your working life is probably going to span 50 years. That simple fact paints a whole new picture, doesn't it? Relying on one company for your entire career? Well, that's just a recipe for becoming obsolete. The only path to long-term success now is taking personal responsibility. Okay, so if you're the CEO, what's your first order of business? It's to figure out what the company's core assets are. And in this case, the company is you, and your assets are your strengths. This is the absolute bedrock of high performance. Drucker said this is the single most important question any of us can ask ourselves. And why is that? It's simple. You can only perform from a place of strength. Trying to build a career on your weaknesses, it's like trying to build a skyscraper on sand. It's a recipe for frustration and, in the end, mediocrity. So how do you find those strengths? Well, it's not with some personality test. Drucker championed a rigorous, time-tested method he called feedback analysis. And this isn't some new age gimmick. He traced it all the way back to 14th century theologians. It's just a really disciplined way to see what you're actually good at, not just what you think you're good at. And the process itself is incredibly practical. Whenever you take on a big project or make an important decision, you just write down what you expect will happen. Then you put it away. 9 to 12 months later, you pull it out and compare reality to what you wrote down. The results can be absolutely stunning. They'll show you your real strengths, but they'll also shine a light on where you have bad habits or maybe some, disabling ignorance, like a brilliant planner who you realize consistently fails to follow through. And this is the key takeaway from that process. Drucker argued that it takes way more energy to go from incompetent to mediocre than it does to go from first-rate performance to truly excellent. So feedback analysis gives you the hard data you need to invest your energy where it's actually going to give you the biggest return. But look, knowing your strengths, that's only half the battle. You also have to understand how you get things done. And this isn't about skill, this is about your personality, which, as Drucker pointed out, is pretty much set in stone by the time you start your career. One of the most critical distinctions Drucker ever made was between readers and listeners. Take Dwight Eisenhower. He was a brilliant commander when his aides gave him written briefs to read first. But as president, he really struggled in press conferences because he was trying to act like a listener. And the exact opposite was true for Lyndon Johnson. He was a master listener who was totally crippled by all the memos left behind by JFK's staff of readers. Understanding which one you are, and just as importantly, which one your boss is, can be a total game changer for your effectiveness. This brings us to the third. And, in many ways, the most important piece of the self-knowledge puzzle. Beyond your strengths and your work style, you have to know what you stand for. You have to know your values. This is Drucker's ultimate ethical gut check, the mirror test. He tells this amazing story about a German ambassador way back in 1906 who was asked to host a pretty scandalous party. The ambassador resigned on the spot. He said he refused to see a pimp in the mirror when he shaved. And that's the test. It's not about what's legal, it's about what lets you live with yourself. So here's the crucial thing to get. While ethics should be universal, values are deeply personal. This table shows exactly what happens when your personal values don't line up with your organization's. If you believe in promoting from within, but your company only hires outsiders, you're setting yourself up for frustration and you're not going to perform well. It's not about who's right or wrong, it's about finding the right fit. Okay, so once you have this deep self-knowledge, you know your strengths, your work style, and your values, you can finally shift from all this internal analysis to external action. You can start to answer that huge question, where do I truly belong? Remember this number? 50 years. That's how long a modern working life is. Successful careers aren't meticulously planned out from day one. They happen when people are prepared for opportunities because they've done the hard work of knowing themselves first. Knowing where you belong is what allows you to keep going, to sustain excellence over that incredibly long marathon. Now notice the subtle but really profound change in the question here. It's not, what do I want to contribute? It's, what should my contribution be? This forces you to look at the needs of the situation and then apply your unique strengths, style, and values to it. When Harry Truman suddenly became president, he knew nothing about foreign affairs, but the situation demanded it. So what did he do? He put himself to school to make the contribution that was needed. And this brings us to the final and maybe the most profound of Drucker's ideas on managing yourself. The ultimate goal here isn't just to be an effective professional. It's to become what he called an educated person. Drucker argued that knowledge isn't really real when it's just sitting in a book or a database. It only becomes real when it's embodied and applied by a person. So the educated person today is someone who can live in both of these worlds, the world of pure theory and ideas, and the messy, practical world of getting things done with people. That's the new standard bearer for our society. Okay, wow, that was a lot to take in. So let's boil it all down into a super quick, rapid-fire summary of the most critical things you can take away from all this. First, you are the CEO of your career, so take command. Second, use feedback analysis. Systematically, discover your true strengths. Third, figure out how you actually perform. Are you a reader or are you a listener? Fourth, define your values and never, ever fail the mirror test. And finally, once you have all that self-knowledge, focus on what your unique contribution should be. And I want to leave you with this last, really powerful thought from Drucker. All the skill, all the strengths, all the strategy in the world, it's all meaningless without a foundation of integrity. Character is the one thing you can't negotiate on. Its absence just breaks everything else you try to do. You are watching 100 Lessons from Peter Drucker. In our next section, we will cover ethics, society, and the social sector. All right, let's dive into the mind of a legend. We're about to unpack some of the most profound insights from Peter Drucker, and we're going to zero in on his thinking about ethics, society, and the absolutely critical role of the social sector. In this section, we are going to cover ethics, society, and the social sector by Peter Drucker. And what that really means is we're going to explore his view that organizations aren't just these economic engines turning out profit. No, for him, they're moral agents with a really deep responsibility to all of us, to humanity. And this quote right here, this is the heart of it all. For Drucker, management wasn't just about spreadsheets and efficiency. He saw it as a liberal art, a moral science. Why? Because its whole purpose is to bring people together to achieve something important. It's about character, it's about wisdom, and it's ultimately about serving the common good. So, here is our roadmap. We're going to cover 5 key areas. We'll start with the unique product of the social sector. Then we'll get into how you actually manage it, explore the culture that drives it, lock down the ethical foundation, and finish with what might be the most personal test of a leader's character. Okay, first up, a changed human being. Drucker saw himself as a social ecologist, and he had this really radical way of looking at the purpose of what he called the third sector, the entire world of nonprofits. Now, this is such a powerful way to frame it. Think of society having these 3 pillars. The private sector, it makes stuff, provides services. The public sector, government, it provides rules and order. But the social sector, its job is completely different. Its one and only product is human transformation. And here's what that product actually looks like in the real world. Think about it. The Salvation Army isn't just serving a meal. Its mission is to turn society's rejects into citizens. The Girl Scouts don't just sell you cookies. Their goal is to help girls become confident, self-respecting young women. The result is always, always a life that has been fundamentally changed for the better. This is one of Drucker's most important insights, and it's a real game changer. Every meeting you have, every email you write, every single dollar you fundraise, all of that is just cost. The only thing that actually counts as a result is the impact you have on someone's life outside the 4 walls of your organization. And that simple idea creates a massive challenge. And that challenge brings us right to our next point. Managing for a mission. I mean, if profit isn't your goal, how on earth do you stay focused and disciplined? This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Drucker actually argued that nonprofits need management even more than businesses do because your mission, well, that's a much tougher, more ambiguous boss than the bottom line. Good intentions are great, but they're not enough. You need a real framework for performance. So, what was Drucker's answer? This brilliant framework, these 5 seemingly simple questions are the nonprofit's version of a financial statement. They provide all the discipline you need to turn a noble mission into real, tangible results. So let's break this down, because this is how you turn that big vision into reality. Your mission has to be laser-focused on the why. And your customer? This is huge. It's not the donor paying the bills, it's the person whose life is actually being changed. And you have to have the humility to go ask them what they value, not just assume you know what's best. That's how you measure what really truly matters. But look, a great strategy is totally useless without the right culture. A clear mission needs a powerful engine to make it go. And that brings us to what Drucker called the spirit of performance. It's the moral energy that really drives an organization forward. I absolutely love this quote. It's so profound. For Drucker, high performance isn't about going out and hiring a team of geniuses. It's about creating a system, a culture where ordinary people feel empowered and inspired to achieve extraordinary things. It's about making their strengths effective and making their weaknesses totally irrelevant. And here's how you build it. You pour your resources into opportunities to make them grow, and you starve the problems. And remember, the real control system in any organization isn't the budget. It's the people you hire, promote, and recognize. Those decisions send the clearest signal about what you truly value. And this spirit of performance, it has to start at the very top. But high performance is pretty meaningless, and honestly, it can even be dangerous if it isn't built on a rock-solid foundation. This brings us to the bedrock of Drucker's entire philosophy, the non-negotiable ethical rules that have to underpin everything a manager does. This ancient Latin phrase, for Drucker, this was the absolute #1 starting point for all professional ethics. Primum non nocere. First, do no harm. This is the manager's Hippocratic oath. Drucker was adamant that there's no such thing as business ethics. They're just ethics. And for any leader, your very first responsibility isn't to do good, it's to guarantee that you will not knowingly cause harm. Not to your people, not to your customers, not to society, period. And this is where all these big ideas about mission and performance come crashing down to the most personal level imaginable. This is the final and frankly the most important test of a leader's character. This story just captures the mirror test perfectly. This ambassador, he was asked to host a party that completely violated his personal code of ethics, and he resigned, a huge, prestigious post, because for him, his own integrity was non-negotiable. He just flat out refused to become a person he couldn't respect. And this is the question Drucker poses to every single one of us, to every leader. At the end of the day, what kind of person do you want to see looking back at you from the mirror? Because while you can learn skills, he believed character is something you bring to the job. Integrity is the one absolute requirement. Okay, let's bring it all home. Here is the Drucker doctrine in a 90-second nutshell. First, mission first. In the social sector, your product is never a thing. It's always a changed human being. Success is measured by the real, positive impact on people's lives. Second, performance-driven. This mission needs a special culture, a spirit of performance. The goal is not to find superstars, but to build a system where ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. You do that by focusing on strengths and opportunities. Third, ethics is absolute. This whole thing is built on one simple, unbreakable rule, primum non nocere. First, do no harm. This isn't some special business ethics. It is the universal oath for any leader. And finally, number 4, integrity is the test. At the end of the day, leadership is character. The ultimate question is the one you ask yourself in the mirror. What kind of person do I want to see? Because as Drucker taught us, you can learn skills, but integrity, that's the price of admission. You are watching 100 Lessons from Peter Drucker. In our next section, we will cover managerial skills and methodology.
All right, in this explainer, we're diving deep into the world of the legendary Peter Drucker, specifically his take on managerial skills and methodology. But before we get into the nuts and bolts, let's start with a really big, fundamental question. So, what is management's real purpose? I mean, really, what's it all about? Is it just about maximizing profit, squeezing out every last drop of efficiency? Well, Peter Drucker had a much more profound answer. He believed the true purpose of management is to make human beings capable of joint performance. Think about that. It's about making their strengths effective and their weaknesses totally irrelevant.
Okay, so let's really get into this, because what Drucker did, well, it was nothing short of a revolution. He was a total game changer. He basically took the whole idea of management, which was this kind of cold, mechanical science all about things and processes, and he completely flipped it on its head. He transformed it into a human-centric discipline, one that's focused on, you guessed it, people.
And this quote right here, it just nails his core belief. The manager is the dynamic, life-giving element in every business. Management isn't some passive, box-ticking exercise. No way. It's the active, creative force that literally breathes life into an organization. It's the spark, the catalyst that turns raw potential into actual reality.
So how did he package this whole revolutionary idea? He gave it a name, management as a liberal art. And honestly, this is the absolute key. If you get this one concept, everything else we talk about is going to click into place.
So when you hear liberal art, don't just think of, painting or poetry. For Drucker, it was so much more. The liberal part meant pulling wisdom from everywhere. History, philosophy, psychology, all to understand what makes people tick, their values, their motivations. And the art part, well, that's all about the practice. It's about applying that wisdom in the real world. See, it's not a hard science with perfect formulas, because you're not dealing with chemicals in a lab. You're dealing with complex, creative, and sometimes unpredictable human beings.
And this table, wow, it just lays out the shifts so perfectly. On one side, you have the old way, scientific management. Here, a worker is basically a cost, a pair of hands. The goal? Efficiency, just doing things right. On the other side, you have Drucker's vision. Now the worker is an asset, a knowledge worker. And the goal? It shifts from just efficiency to effectiveness, and that's a huge difference. It's not about doing things right, it's about doing the right things. The key skill is no longer just technical supervision, it's about integration and true leadership.
And this next quote, it's one of his most powerful ideas for sure. The purpose of an organization is to make strengths productive and weaknesses irrelevant. Let's make that real for a second. Think about Abraham Lincoln in the middle of the Civil War. Everyone, and I mean everyone, was in his ear about his top general, Ulysses S. Grant, having a drinking problem. You know what Lincoln basically said? Find out what he's drinking and send a barrel of it to my other generals. He didn't care about the weakness. He staffed for Grant's one massive strength, winning battles, and in doing so, he made the weakness irrelevant. That is the essence of Drucker's philosophy right there.
Now, Drucker had this brilliant analogy to really drive this point home. He said, look, management isn't a pure science, judged only by how much you know. It's a humanity. It's like medicine. Think about it. What's the ultimate test for a doctor? It's not their GPA from medical school, right? It's whether the patient actually gets better. And for a manager, it's the exact same logic. The final measure is the performance, the growth, and the well-being of their people. It's all about the results in human terms. So if we take this big, grand philosophy of management as a humanity, what does it actually boil down to for a manager day to day? Well, Drucker said it comes down to just two core responsibilities: mastering people and mastering information. These are the two pillars that support everything else. So let's break them down. First up, pillar one, people. And Drucker was absolutely adamant about this. He said the most critical decisions a manager makes, the ones that have the most leverage, are about people. Hiring, promoting, deciding who does what, that is the ultimate form of organizational control. And why is that? Because these decisions do way more than just fill a slot on an org chart. They send a massive signal to the entire organization about what behaviors, what values, and what kind of performance are truly rewarded.
Okay, on to pillar two, information. This is so crucial, especially today. See, in what Drucker called the knowledge economy, which is basically the world we all live in now, people aren't just cogs in a machine. They're associates, not subordinates. And in that kind of environment, you can't build high performance on just giving orders. It doesn't work. Performance is built on trust. And where does that trust come from? It's built on a shared, mutual responsibility for information.
All right, so that's the big picture philosophy. It sounds great, right? Management as a liberal art, focusing on people and information. But here's the best part. Drucker wasn't just a philosopher. He was all about action. So the big question is, how do we actually do this? Let's get practical and equip you with some of Drucker's most powerful tools from his toolkit.
When it comes to making decisions about people, Drucker's message is crystal clear. This is a discipline, not a gut feeling. So here's his 5-step process. Step 1, really think through the assignment. What does this job need right now, not 6 months ago? Step 2, look at several qualified people. You have to force yourself to do this, to fight your own biases. Step 3, study their performance records. And here's the key, focus on their proven strengths, not just vague potential. Step 4, talk to people who've actually worked with them. Get the real story. And finally, step 5, once you've made the choice, you have to ensure the person you picked truly understands the job and what you expect. And if you think this sounds like a lot of work, well, General George Marshall used this exact process to pick the entire U.S. Army Command for World War II. Yeah, it works.
Okay, let's switch gears to that second pillar, information. Drucker proposed a radical shift in thinking here. He said that for a knowledge worker, the most important question isn't what information do I need to get? Nope, you have to flip it. You need to start by asking yourself, what information do I owe to others? This question, he argued, is the absolute foundation of trust and effective teamwork.
So how do you actually figure out what you owe? Well, Drucker had some practical tips. You could write a manager's letter that lays out your objectives and what you're working on. But even simpler, just go ask your coworkers a really brave question. What do I do that gets in your way or makes your job harder? The answers you get might just blow your mind. And this leads to one of Drucker's biggest aha moments. He realized that most of what we call personality conflicts in the office, they aren't about personality at all. They're information gaps. People just don't have what they need from each other to do their jobs well.
And here's one final, really powerful tool from the Drucker toolkit. It's about budgeting. Now, I know budgeting sounds like a total snooze fest, right? An accounting chore, but Drucker saw it completely differently. He saw the budget as a diagnostic tool. He was a huge fan of what he called organized abandonment. Basically, it means using something like zero-based budgeting to look at every single thing your team does and ask one brutal question. If we weren't already doing this, would we start it today? And if the answer is no, you stop. This is how you systematically free up your best people and your most valuable resources for the real opportunities of the future.
Okay, I know that was a ton of information. So let's boil it all down to the absolute essentials. If you're going to take anything away from this, let it be these key points. This is your 90-second Drucker takeaway. Ready? Let's hit it.
First and foremost, management is a humanity. It's not about spreadsheets. It's about people. Its entire purpose is to enable ordinary people to do absolutely extraordinary things together.
Second, efficiency is doing things right. Effectiveness is doing the right things. Never, ever confuse being busy with getting results. They are not the same thing.
Third, the #1 requirement for any leader, period. It's integrity. You can learn skills, you can be brilliant, but character is the foundation. A leader without integrity is like a poison that corrupts everything else.
4, your focus has to be outside the organization. Why? Because inside your company walls, there are only costs. The only place results exist is with a customer.
And finally, bring it all home with this. Staff for strength. Your job is to make people's weaknesses irrelevant. That is the true purpose of an organization, and it's how you unlock performance you never thought was possible.
So, in the end, Drucker leaves us with a profound and deeply personal challenge. He called it the mirror test. It's simple. At the end of the day, can you look at the person in the mirror and be proud of the kind of leader you're choosing to be? Are you building something that truly matters?
Thank you for watching Management Tools 365 Learning Studio, your compass for direction, your catalyst for action, and your momentum for growth.